How's it going, trainers, and welcome to another Pokemon Go PvP video. Today we're going to be discussing the Mirror Cup, and specifically the Boulder Cup. Now remember that the Mirror Cup consists of all previous tournaments from henceforth. Starting off with the Boulder Cup, we're going to go to a Meta Simplified graphic that I created. Let's see it here. As you can see at the top, you have Medicham and Skarmory. You have the Mud Boys on the top left of the circle pattern. You have the Confusion users on the top right half of the circle pattern. The Standard Fighters, or otherwise known as the Power-Up Punch users, in the bottom of the circle. And on the bottom of this pyramid, you can see the Steel Rocks and the Steel Electric types. Otherwise, on the right side, you can see the Mold Breakers. Now, diving a little bit farther, we're going to delve into each of these categories. So let's go ahead and start with that. First off, we're going to discuss the two staples of the Boulder Cup, being Medicham and Skarmory. Originally, Skarmory was the, let's say, powerhouse of the Boulder Cup, and mostly because the meta and rules of Silph GG tournaments were that you could run as many as you want as a certain Pokemon, so a lot of players would opt to run 2 to 3 Skarmorys on a team, and generally sweep most lineups because it's a little overwhelming. Especially back then, considering Medicham did not have Power-Up Punch just yet. But now, I would say it's shifted a bit with Medicham's rise. It is now the new powerhouse. Skarmory is still great. Skarmory still has its usability, but it can have trouble with things it's supposed to be good against, like the fighters, for example. When you think of, let's say, Poliwrath and Hitmonchan's access to Ice Punch, if a skilled player knows what they're really doing against you with that Skarmory, they could certainly beat out your Skarmory. So moving on to the next category, we have the Mud Boys. Now looking back in the past again, the Mud Boys originally with the Boulder Cup were a pretty big thing as well. However, it was just Whiscash, Marshtomp, and actually Quagsire. But Quagsire's role has pretty much been overcome, I would say, in this meta by Swampert. Swampert's addition with Hydro Cannon is just, it's too much. Having Mudshot as the fast move, Hydro Cannon, Earthquake, it's just an insanely tanky and spammy Mudboy, and whew, is it good. Marshtomp is still really good, and it's great in the sense of you could get it a much higher level than Swampert. However, you would have to run, say, Surf as opposed to Hydro Cannon, which certainly lacks the power, whereas Hydro Cannon can hit anything for neutral damage and do a lot, much like Blast Burn on a Charizard against a lot of things. Hydro Cannon on Swampert is fantastic. The pros of the Mud Boys is that they beat the Electrics, the Steels, and Rocks, and they actually beat the Confusion users such as Bronzong and Jirachi as well. Cons would be that they have a very bad weakness to Grass-type Pokemon, mainly Gallade with its Leaf Blade that comes really quick, and Torterra's Razor Leaf is going to rip through the Mud Boys as if they were nothing, to be honest. They also lose to the majority of the fighters, and yeah, those are pretty much the main cons of the Mud Boys, but there's a lot of positives. So moving on to the next set of typing, let's say, we're going to go with the Confusion users. The Confusion users consist of Bronzong and Jirachi, and it is notable that Jirachi isn't going to be available to most trainers, because you would have to have gone to one of the Go Fest to gain access. But I'm here to tell you that Bronzong is actually the better choice in my opinion due to its 2 new charge moves it just recently got. It got Psyshock and Bulldoze, and that coverage is just fantastic as opposed to, let's just say, Jirachi's Doom Desire, which is the one big plus with Jirachi in my opinion. Not to discount Jirachi, Jirachi is still great, and if you have it and you like it, you should use it. But Bronzong is great as well, and I personally think it's even better. The pros of the Confusion users is that they annihilate the fighters and can beat Skarmory with shield advantage. Their cons is that they lose to Medicham, like, pretty bad, and the Mud Boys and Magnezone of the Steel Electric typing. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and talk about the fighters, otherwise known as the Power-Up Punch users. Now, you can see here that Medicham is in this infographic. However, it shouldn't be quite classified with these, as it is more of a staple. Instead, you should be looking at Hitmonchan, Lucario, and Poliwrath as a way to have an additional fighter on your team. The pros to the fighters that they beat the Mud Boys, the electric and steel types, and the cons would be that they fall very, very hard to the confusion users as well as Skarmory. So they have their use. However, as I've noted before, Hitmonchan and Poliwrath both have access to Ice Punch, so if you get enough power-up punches in before and you have a good high attack stat going on, your Ice Punches are going to do fantastic against Skarmory. So you could almost wash away that loss if handled correctly. Please do note, though, that the Poliwrath you would want would be the Legacy Fast Move Mudshot Poliwrath. So keep that in mind. Moving on to the next section of Pokemon in this infographic, we're going to go with the electric types as well as the steel types. The electric types consist of Melmetal, Magneton, and Magnezone. Magneton, you're going to want the Legacy Thundershock Discharge, which is pretty hard to obtain. Otherwise, the next best substitute to Magneton itself is Magnezone. The electric types as a whole do really well against Skarmory, obviously. They do good against water-type users such as Relicanth. They have a pretty good positive matchup against the confusion users, mostly because of their steel typing resisting the confusion. However, their cons are that they fall very hard to the Mud Boys, because the Mud Boys resist their electric type damage. They fall hard to the fighters, because fighters do well against their steel typing. And they fall to a majority of the Mold Breakers, actually, outside of, Relicanth. Yeah. As far as the steel types, mainly Steelix and Bastiodon, their pros are that they completely wall Skarmory. Skarmory can't do a thing other than Flash Cannon, and that's really only against Bastiodon, and that ain't gonna do much. They also wall the electric types. The electric types can't do nothing. They melt to Medicham, the fighters, the Mud Boys, and they fall again to a majority of the Mold Breakers. Going on to the next, we're going to actually talk about a good chunk of the Mold Breakers, starting off with Gallade. Gallade can be run in two different ways. You could run it as a confusion user with the Confusion Fast Move, or you could run Charm, and Charm is actually becoming pretty more popular. The Charm moveset is actually the moveset in Gallade that you'd want to allow yourself to beat Medicham when Medicham has two shields as well as you. Gallade also does very well against the Mud Boys, but it does generally lose to Skarmory, and it really needs its shields in order to survive against most things. Torterra with the fast move of Razor Leaf does really good neutral fast damage to other opposing Pokemon. It of course completely destroys the Mud Boys. It does well against the electrics, so, and it does well against the steel rock types due to their rock typing, such as Bastiodon. Skarmory eats Torterra alive. It falls to most of the fighters, unfortunately, because of their Ice Punch capabilities, and you can't really get to charge moves too often just because of Razor Leaf's energy buildup being so low. Fortress, however, walls the confusion users, can hold its own against just about anything in the cup, to be honest, just as it always has been in the majority of cups, but again, it falls hard to Skarmory. So as you can see, Skarmory's time to shine is against these outside-the-box Mold Breaker Pokemon. Going on to the next session of Mold Breakers, we have Flygon, Gliscor, Nidoking, and Relicanth. Flygon is interesting. It beats the electrics, and it does really well against the steel types. It really doesn't like Gallade, to be honest, and confusion users do well against it, and it will fall hard to Torterra and the Mud Boys. Moving on to Gliscor. Gliscor can almost be classified as another flyer along with Skarmory, and it actually beats Skarmory. It beats the confusion users, especially with shield advantage, and it can handle the fighters and the electric types. It really does need shields though, and it is another Pokemon that would be walled by something like Steelix or Bastiodon. Going on to Nidoking. If you want Nidoking to be viable in this cup, you are going to need the Legacy Fast Move Fury Cutter, and if you just happen to have that and decide to give it a whirl, Nidoking is good against the electric types and does really well against Steelix. Again, it needs its legacy move. It loses to the Mud Boys pretty hard, the fighters, Gallade, all the confusion users, and several of the Mold Breaker Pokemon, and Skarmory as well, even. Going on to the last of the Mold Breakers that we have listed, we're going to discuss Relicanth just a tad bit. Relicanth does really well against the Steel-type, Sub-type Pokemon, just because of its Water Gun damage, but it is really, really weak to everything else, and can be pretty hard to obtain due to its regional status, being only really in New Zealandish area, and yeah. So that is pretty much the gist of the majority of the Boulder Cup. And as you can see, there's actually a good decent amount of options for just about everything, substitute-wise. I do recommend that you do, of course, use the two staples being Metacham and Skarmory, as they are just so overwhelmingly powerful in this cup. Otherwise, you have options as Confusion users. You have several options as the Mud Boys, especially since Swampert is very easy to obtain now thanks to its recent Community Day. Plenty of Electric Steel types, plenty of fighters to choose from, whether it's Hitmonchan, Legacy Poliwrath, or even Lucario, who's really great, to be honest. The mold breakers are also there to do exactly what they're named as, is to break the mold. And with the newly announced Ralts Community Day coming very, very soon, a week from today as of recording, actually, we'll see what its special move is going to be, and it might actually secure an even better place in this Boulder Cup meta. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Have a great day, good luck with your Boulder Cups, and take care. Bye.